So you've done all the things. You've done the diet work. Started doing yoga. You maybe even started doing brain retraining, but you still feel like crap. So why is that? Should not be viewed as medical advice. The information and education provided here is not intended to supplement or replace medical treatment or advice or diagnosis. So obviously always work with your physician or medical professional before trying or implementing any information that you learn here. This is for educational purposes only. So how did I get here? So hello, I'm Alicia Cicerelli. I'm a PhD trained scientist. In January of 2013, my face started randomly swelling up at work, and I was then diagnosed with chronic idiopathic angioedema in hives, which is likely a mast cell disorder. So basically overnight, I developed heightened sensitivities to multiple foods, and even changes in my hormones could cause me to have these angioedema reactions. I spent the next 3 to 4 years trying to find the perfect diet that would better control my autoimmune issues with really minimal success. I never expected I would need to use my training as a scientist to try and solve my own health issues. It's been quite the roller coaster ride, but I'm glad to be here with you. So this is me. This is hard for me to look at this, but it's what I looked like a few years ago. So this was after I did all the diet stuff that I just mentioned. When I was initially sick, everything I read was just change your diet and take lots of supplements and then you'll be better. And as you can see from these pictures, and it was really, really scary because I went from basically being healthy overnight to having these health issues all of a sudden. And by making some changes to my diet, I saw some progress in reducing the frequency of my angioedema and hives, but I was still getting these reactions multiple times a month. This is actually my lowest point here. So, I look like I'm smiling, right? But as we know, many of us, we have an invisible illness in terms of on days I didn't have reactions, I looked fine. But on days I did have reactions, obviously you could tell that there's seriously some problems going on. But my reactions morphed from just being my lips and my eyes to started to morph into my throat, partially swelling, closed. And we were on vacation in October 2016, and I'm smiling in this picture, but I was incredibly, I read this book, and it was a real eye-opener for me. This was the first time I'd ever heard about the link between ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and chronic health conditions. So the more trauma a child has experienced, the more likely they are to have chronic health conditions as an adult. It's estimated that up to 70% of adults have at least one ACE. And you might be wondering, well, how are we defining an adverse childhood experience? So they're defined as having your parents go through divorce, being bullied, having a parent with mental illness or alcohol or drug issues, going through any type of abuse, having a parent who is frequently absent, those types of things. And I have listed here, you can go to a website or even just Google ACEs quiz, and you can take the ACEs quiz to determine what your ACEs score is. And I've also indicated below the actual initial study in the 90s that was published with these findings. And there's been follow-up studies done on this, which have found the same, basically have come to the same conclusions around that, yes, as we experience these traumas in childhood, we're more likely to have chronic health conditions and autoimmune issues as adults. So how does having ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, put us at greater risk of autoimmune or chronic illness? So when we experience these ACEs as children, our body can then get stuck in this high stress fight, flight, or freeze response. So many of us are familiar with the fight-flight response. And this fight-flight response is supposed to be used sparingly by our body. It's not supposed to be something that all day, every day, we're living in this high stress state. But if that's the case, that we're under high amounts of stress, it starts to take a toll on our health. And I actually cover this in more detail in the Brain Love module, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the webinar. But I just wanted to mention, if you want some more information, there's a number of different people who also study this area, and I've listed their information, their names here. So what happens if I've been living in fight, flight, or freeze for years? So over time, this hypervigilance becomes exhausting for our body and things start to go awry. Our body was never meant to be living in this high stress state for prolonged periods of time. It's devoting so many resources to this hypervigilant army, as I'll call it, that other areas of the body start to suffer. So we might be having digestive issues, skin issues, just kind of like random things that we notice, oh, that's weird. I don't usually have problems with that. What's going on? So these mysterious health issues are our body's way of warning us that it doesn't like this heightened stress state. So our body's basically firing warning shots saying, hey, this is too much right now. I need you to make some changes. I can't handle this. Something needs to change. And in the next slide, we'll dig into this area of science called Psychoneuroimmunology. So this area of science was actually developed and discovered by Dr. Candace Pert in the 80s and 90s. And I actually had her information listed in the previous slide. But what this means is that our brain and nervous system, our immune system, and our hormones are all connected. So if we're living in that high stress, fight, flight, freeze state, and our brain and nervous system are very stressed, it's going to affect our immune system and also our hormones. So I'll just pause to let that sink in. If our brain and nervous system are under this high amounts of stress for a prolonged period of time, it starts to affect our immune system and then also our hormones. And we might see either really elevated cortisol levels, the stress hormone, or really low cortisol levels, because over time, our body has just started to shut down. It just can't take it anymore, and it's really starting to affect other parts of our body. So where am I at now? So I've been in remission from my autoimmune disorder for over 5 years now. I follow my 5 focus areas that we'll talk more about later in this webinar, but I'm no longer thinking about my autoimmune condition 24/7. It's not constantly occupying my mind. I'm not looking at everything through this prism of, will I feel well enough to go to work? What if I have a reaction? What if? And I have my life back, and I feel so grateful for that. So back in 2013, when I was diagnosed, this is what I thought would help heal my body. You know, I read a bunch of books that were like written by different MDs, and they were like, oh, just eat really clean, take these supplements, and you'll be fine. And so I thought, just eating a super clean diet, and I don't know, maybe take up yoga, and that was going to be like the way I would be able to, control my health issues, right? But this is what I actually found to be really impactful for helping my body heal. Cultivating this healing mindset, addressing trauma in the nervous system, which we just have talked about briefly, and then diet is like a little piece, because we don't want to put more stress on our body, so we want to eat clean, but that's only a small piece of the puzzle. So you might be wondering, where do most of us go wrong? So many of you are just probably like me and have tried to do some of the things that I was doing. So we typically are only addressing 1 or 2 pieces of this puzzle. So we maybe just look at changing our diet. Maybe we started doing some brain retraining, but that's really not going to cut it, frankly. Like, there's a number of other areas, and these things all work together that we need to be working on to support our body, build that foundation where the body feels safe, the nervous system can go back into that rest and digest mode, and the body actually can heal. Because if we're just trying to clean up our diet, it's not going to cut it. The body is very smart, and it knows, it's like, yeah, I'm not fooled by just eating clean. You've got other things we need to address here. So another way to describe this is using this house analogy. So you look at this house here that clearly needs some updates and some TLC. And this is me when I was at my sickest, and I really needed some TLC too, and a lot of love, honestly. But if we're going to renovate this house, if you think of it this way, if we just update the plumbing, right, and maybe that's what we would kind of do as a comparison with just changing our diet, that's not going to be enough, because there's likely some issues with the roof. There's maybe some problems with the windows. The foundation might need some help. And that's kind of how these pieces come together with what I'll talk about with my course coming up. So you might have already done some diet stuff. Why it's so important, we also work through the brain piece, the trauma, the grief and trauma piece, support our vagus nerve, the self-care. And then I have a whole section around mindset. So we're talking about these other areas of our life that most of us never think about, that we also want to be supportive of our nervous system in these other areas of our life, and around boundaries, control and perfectionism, and how we speak to ourselves. So I want to pause here and say, please don't feel overwhelmed right now, because, I'm covering a lot of information, but these pieces actually all work together, and it'll all start to make more sense kind of as I continue to go through things here. So here's some takeaways so far. So I shared my story. We talked about the link between trauma and ACEs, and the nervous system and chronic illness. So those adverse childhood experiences, if you have those, the more likely your nervous system is living in that high stress response, which then often manifests then as chronic illness or autoimmune issues later down the road. We talked about 5 pieces that I've found have been most impactful for regaining my health. And I also shared a number of resources, including the book that helped save my life. So where do most people go wrong? So on the left here, they probably have spent a lot of time and money focusing on their diet and supplements. Maybe you've done a bunch of nutrient and stool testing because, practitioners love the stool tests, right? Oh, here, take another stool test. Here, spend another $500 and let's check your stool. Or let's go to the naturopath and spend at least $350 to $400 for one appointment. And then let's get another $600 to $700 in supplements, because, we have to leave every appointment at least spending $1,000 out of pocket, by the way. At least that's what it was like for me about 5 to 6 years ago. It might even be more expensive than that now. I don't know. What people are missing often is this tailored plan, focusing on actually the right things, working on our brain and nervous system support, signaling safety to our body, and also learning additional tools around mindset and regaining trust with our body. Our goal is to be confident and focused here and not overwhelmed. And this is a really important thing I want to mention, because just doing lots of things here does not necessarily equal success. I'm just going to keep it real here. Does not necessarily equal success, because we're already under a lot of stress, and adding more to our plate often is not going to make things better. So I want to introduce my course, the Autoimmune Reset Course. In this course, I put together what I have learned in the last 10 years on how to work with your body and not against it. So in this course, you learn why your body responds the way it does, and you learn actionable steps you can take to support it. So you're going to learn how to support your body when you feel like crap. Because the truth is, I'm going to teach you how to do this, but you will learn how to implement it in your day-to-day life. And you might have noticed my chocolate souffle analogy thing here. So what this means is, I'm going to compare this to some of there's other courses out there which do nervous system stuff and trauma stuff and all of that. But what I find with a lot of those courses is it's, in my opinion, way too complicated. Like, who has 5 hours to, devote to just learning about their vagus nerve? I'm teaching you how to build a foundation and safety with your body. And when we do that, other things start to fall into line. You don't need to become the world expert on the polyvagal theory to learn how to support your body. So this is why my approach is different. So this course is for you if you like to learn at your own pace. So this is a self-guided course. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete, so it can be completed in an afternoon. If you're short on time, but you could devote an afternoon to learning high-quality information on how to better support your body. You'd benefit from learning from someone who's been there and done that, which can save you time on your journey, because I spent a lot of time doing a lot of stuff that was not helpful. And, I look back and I mean, it makes me a little bit sad, because I've lost probably 3 to 4 years of my life in my 30s being very sick and not on the right path. But I can share what I've learned with you, so you actually are focusing on the right things. Also, if you want to focus on the most impactful things to do to support your health. If you don't have time for lots of extra credit stuff that's not going to really help, then that's what this course is for. And you like things taught in a simple, easy to understand way. If you like how I've presented the information, if you found that helpful, like that's what to expect in this course. You might be wondering, well, what does the course look like? So there's 6 different video modules. So gut love, brain love, brave science, mindset, and self-care. There's a self-assessment, which actually the self-assessment is to help you plan for your body rather than just feeling like, oh, I need to do everything here. No, you're going to learn the overall framework, but then you're going to take, based on the self-assessment, you're going to do what your body's telling you need to do. And I also have some additional guides to support your body while on this journey because I understand people have different learning styles. I also have some bonuses that I've included, one of which is my summary guide, which is I've taken screenshots. So each of these video modules that I mentioned, screenshots of the most important slides, and I've put this all in a summary guide for you that you can download. So while you're taking the course and going through the modules, you can write some notes down. So after you complete this Autoimmune Reset course, you will have an understanding of what's impacting your health and have the tools to build a foundation of trust with your body. You'll feel confident and focused because you know you're on the right path. You actually know you're doing the right things instead of feeling like you're just randomly trying stuff. You'll also have more compassion for yourself while you navigate this journey. And you might be like, Alicia, why does that matter? Well, you know what? We're going to cover that in the mindset section, and you'll learn how having compassion for self is actually soothing to your nervous system, which is a really important piece to supporting our health. And you'll also have a simplified toolbox to go to when life happens. If you have a flare, if you're not feeling great, how do I respond? So some FAQs here. So you might be wondering, how long does the course take to complete? We already covered that. It's self-guided. It takes 2 to 3 hours. You might be wondering, well, I'm already doing brain retraining. How is this different? This is not a formal brain retraining program. It's much more zoomed out and simplified where we focus on building a foundation of safety in your body. So this will also complement, I will say, any other work you're already doing. How is a simplified approach better? A lot of times we're told, you just need to be doing more. Well, I would argue here, if you're struggling with chronic illness, your body is already under high amounts of stress, and endless modules or long courses are not necessarily a better way. I would rather you focus on doing the right things and build a foundation of trust with your body to see results. So you really have 2 choices now. So you could either choose to basically just still focus on your diet and your supplements and focus on nutrient and stool testing, or spend a lot of money on more practitioners or supplements. Or you can be on the path and not out in the weeds here and have a plan that's focused on the right things, on the brain and nervous system, and really learn other tools to support your body and regain trust with your body. So our goal with this on the right-hand side is to be confident and focused going forward and not feeling overwhelmed. So, are you ready to get started and finally get on the right path? If so, click the link below.